Rotherham, who beat them, are managed by Paul Warne, a man who is been in that role for quite some time, and he is going to be the main focus of our podcast this week. We're sticking in the Championship fully today as well. We covered Rooney. Later on, we'll talk about Birmingham's Aitor Karanka, who got a big win against his former club on Saturday lunchtime. But yeah, Paul Warne here, Mike. I find him a fascinating character. He's the sort of man who I imagine if I was a player, I'd need an arm around the shoulder, probably constantly. And I imagine that Paul Warne would be the man to provide me with that. First of all, before we explore his personality type, could he be too nice?
Well, this is the thing with Warne. He's very authentic and very easy to get on with, and he's very big on connection. And he's built probably 2 teams from scratch now at Rotherham, and there's been a real connection between players. I think that's a hallmark of his teams. Is what goes on behind the scenes is real genuine affection between players. And he talked when they were relegated 2 years ago about as though the players had been on a journey together and they weren't going to be together much longer. And that was kind of his sales pitch for survival. Make sure, try and finish this story on a high, because you players might not get to play together again, and you want to have something to remember these connections by, because you've built some friendships, that could be lasting friendships. So that's very much about what he's all about behind the scenes. But yes, too nice, possibly, in terms of his mentality and certainly his attitude towards the Championship. I think sometimes he can be a little bit too respectful of the level. Relegated twice from the Championship now, but promoted twice back from League One. You don't get 2 promotions from League One at 2 attempts unless you know what you're doing. And he's clearly had some success in that regard. But I'm not entirely sure whether he actually believes he belongs at Championship level even now yet, at this stage.
So that obviously, if he is too nice, he can't necessarily change that. That's something that is ingrained. But what I guess you're saying is he can do is change his mentality, and that then should kind of infiltrate its way to the players. So, tell them that they belong in the Championship, prove that you are at this level. Because Gareth Ainsworth, who is manager of Wycombe, are a team who, let's face it, no one expected them to be at this level this season. He comes out, all guns blazing, even on the back of a 7-match losing streak, and says, we're going to win sooner or later. We're going to stay up. We're going to get enough points. We've got the players to do it. We've got the heart to do it. Whereas you don't really get that from Warne, do you? You kind of get him saying, well, yeah, draw, pleased with that, another point on the board. He kind of almost accepts what he's got, whereas Gareth Ainsworth seems to always be punching upwards.
Yeah, I think with Warne, it's, you mentioned the draws there, and 2 seasons ago when they were relegated, I think it was 16 draws they finished the season with, and there was numerous occasions within the season that they had potential, like real 6-pointers. I recall one game in particular. They went away to Millwall. It was probably around January time in the season. And if you're targeting certain games, I was looking, you profile teams for betting, and I'm profiling and thinking, what a great time to go to Millwall. They could be stretched. They've had injuries. They've had, all these little issues that add up, that mount up, and you think this is a big opportunity for Rotherham to go and win and nick this. If they can keep a clean sheet, they can go and nick it. And I think they played at a 0-0 draw and were really happy with the result afterwards. And you're thinking, there was a missed opportunity, when you've not necessarily seen it. But Warne's got this mentality that's like, he's like almost 2 different managers between the League One and the Championship. And the limiting beliefs comes out in his language. He talks about points being like gold dust at Championship level. And, you get a point away from home and it's like a little gold nugget, he always says. And it's like, it kind of creates this scarcity value, as if, again, not belonging, that Rotherham don't necessarily belong at this level. So a single point away from home against the team in the bottom 6 among us is something to treasure. It's a real big thing. And, he says a lot of this stuff half joking, but I think it kind of feeds into the whole psyche of where Rotherham see themselves, in some of these encounters. So that's why this win away at Derby is really interesting this weekend. It came late, and I think sometimes it was good. I've heard Warne say this before, again, jokingly. It's a good job we scored late because we didn't have too long to hold on. And I think back to, I backed them a few weeks ago at Blackburn. I thought Blackburn away was a good opportunity for them to as an underdog, go away and land a big price away from home. And I think they went 1-0 up in the game and they were the better team for an hour or so. And then they just kind of sat back on it, invited the pressure, and ended up losing the game 2-1. And, it was almost like they had too long in the game. And rather than going for it late on to win the game 2-1, they were kind of sitting back and waiting for what possibly seemed like the inevitable. And yeah, it's just, this is it. It's an ongoing theme that in clutch moments, you have to be careful the way you frame things in the media, because in clutch moments, what's at the back of your mind can often be these throwaway comments. And what is interesting this season, though, is that Warne appears to have picked up himself on the fact that his players in certain matches have paid the opposition too much respect. Not necessarily making the connection, with the previous team or the things that he says, in and around matches, but he has raised the concern that his players need to feel like they belong at the level because they've come out in the first half of certain games and they've had to go behind in order to get themselves going, like they've paid the opposition too much respect. I think QPR away was one such game, not the only one. There's been 3 or 4 times he's mentioned it. So I think he's kind of coming round to this idea that, we need to start really believing that we belong at this level. But I think he's got to be careful still about his own language in the meantime and the way that he frames things. Because you make the comparison with Gareth Ainsworth, and like you say, Ainsworth is so bullish. He's so, he's determined. There's no question in his mind that we don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to survive. We've got, and it's that underdog spirit. There's 2 ways an underdog spirit can go. It can be proving the world wrong, or it can be, well, we'll give it a good shot, but, we are the underdogs. And, if it's not meant to be, then it's not meant to be. The 2 different routes you can take when you see yourself as an underdog. And, Warne should probably look towards Ainsworth and the way that Ainsworth frames things a little bit more in the way, and be careful with his language sometimes.
What is this born out of then, or what could it be born out of? So I kind of have 2 questions here. Is this because maybe Paul Warne didn't ever see himself as a football manager and a manager at this level, certainly, and so he's still maybe in a slight, I guess a mindset of disbelief that he's here? Or could it be something to do with the fact that Rotherham don't have big wads of cash to throw around, so he's not able to recruit the type of players that he would see as championship quality, or those sort of players that would fit in at the top of the championship table? Or could it be a combination of both? Or, Mike, is it something completely different that I've not thought of?
Yeah, no, I think it is a combination of both. I think the first thing we have to say is that, let's make no bones about it. Rotherham do belong in the bottom 6 for sure, probably bottom 3 of the championship in terms of budget. That's the level that they're at. But everybody knows that in advance. Many clubs in all divisions have to just get on with it and come up with ways and means to confound that. So yeah, there's no 2 ways about that. He is shopping in a completely different market to most clubs. But also as well, yeah, I mean, what you say, every manager's strength is his weakness, as I've said in previous episodes. And in Warne's case, it's basically, he is very vulnerable as a manager and very authentic. He's one of the most genuine people. You listen to people within the game, opposition managers especially, and you can't escape the impression that Warne is one of the most genuine people you'll meet in football. That's a strength. Anything can be strength in leadership, and behind the scenes, that's a real strength. That ability to be vulnerable and to be genuinely authentic, and for your players to understand that whenever you say something, it's always coming from the heart. You wear your heart on your sleeve, and you're not just sort of bullshitting, basically, just trying to conjure up something to say the right thing at the right time, just say anything, whatever gets the job done. No, he's genuinely coming from a place of authenticity, but within that, always wanting to be in touch with that authentic side of himself. I remember the very, very first interview he ever gave as a manager for the Football League paper, made real waves because of how authentic he was in the interview, about talking about his son, sort of scouting for him and talking about other teams in the division and bringing in papers and saying, the scouting reports of future opposition. and then saying like, you know, he doesn't realise that, you know, his dad feels like a bit of a fraud, you know, that I'm not at the level that he thinks I am. I'm his dad and I'm his hero, but I feel like a fraud. Like I fell into this job. But, you know, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever for Warne to be thinking anything like that now after 2 promotions. You know, look at all the managers in League One that have not achieved promotion in the 3 years that he's done it twice. You know, so there's absolutely, there should be no doubt on his part. But I think sometimes this level of authenticity and vulnerability can still come through in a way that is not helpful. And I think it's one of those where there possibly needs to be a little bit more of a shield that what the Paul Warne we see behind the scenes and what comes out to the media and kind of represents Rotherham in the context of the division. You know, the vulnerability stops at the dressing room door and then he goes out to the media, and you know there's a clear message that can be helpful for the psyche of the team going forward.
Yeah, because he's often talking about his son in post-match interviews. He's also here in Leeds, we get the Yorkshire news, obviously, and he's always on there doing something in the community with his Rotherham players. So he clearly absolutely throws himself into everything that he possibly can, and the players clearly enjoy being around him. There's certainly positivity in that dressing room. They never know when they're beaten either. You know, even when they go 1-0 down, they often at least give it a good go, particularly as you say late in games. So with that in mind, what sort of players do you believe work best with Paul Warne? Do you think you have to kind of be a bit of a grafter and maybe someone who's worked their way to this point? Or do you think, I mean, let's say, for example, he's given a big budget one season and he's able to pick the cream of the crop when it comes to championship players. Do you think that Warne's the sort of manager who has to be really careful with the type of player he connects with?
Yeah, I do think that he would potentially struggle with big egos. You know, we're saying about a manager who makes himself vulnerable in terms of his own status within, you know, managerial circles. Well, he suddenly gets, you know, you imagine someone like a Troy Deeney in his dressing room, and but I think you know, recruitment is something I think he spends a lot of time on, because, you know, he has built 2 teams from scratch that have got out of League One and given a good account of themselves in the Championship. You know, certainly been, you know, made the presence felt within games if results haven't necessarily measured up to the same standards. And you know, I think that same level of authenticity, I think he looks into the personality and character of a player, you know, to see, you know, I think he recognises what he sees in himself, the same level of sort of genuineness within a player, that I can tap into something here that, you know, this player just needs someone to believe in him and, you know, needs to feel part of something bigger, and, you know, to have the camaraderie behind the scenes and, you know, that side of the game. So I think that's very much in his recruitment. You know, we can make the link with Gareth Ainsworth. It's the same decision-making process, just at different levels of it. And with Ainsworth, the recruitment's a big thing. With Ainsworth, he looks for the backstory of a player to tap into something that basically, you know, is wanting to prove the world wrong, that they've had some kind of hardship just not so long ago in the career that they really want to avenge. That can be a big thread for Ainsworth to try to tap into. With Warne, I think it's just genuinely, here's a nice guy who will make us a happy group, and we'll all be, you know, together in this, and we're going to have a real good time behind the scenes day to day. We're going to work hard. You know, there's no doubt that his teams work hard, certainly physically, with his, you know, his background as a fitness coach and his understanding of sports science and all of that side of things. You know, they outrun most teams, but whereas in League One they ran over the top of teams, obviously it's not so straightforward in the Championship. And, you know, so his recruitment is something that he thinks long and hard about, for sure, I think. I'm not sure. I think sometimes it can almost be not easy, but it's quite straightforward for him. He hasn't got the budget. So the qualities he's looking for are not necessarily at a premium in the transfer market anyway. So there's kind of a nice synergy between what he can do and what he wants to do anyway. So, you know, it is genuinely about looking for personalities and fitness and athleticism and just creating this culture and camaraderie behind the scenes. So I don't necessarily think to that extreme, the budget and that side of things is necessarily a problem. It's just, you know, he's got this blueprint that he's worked to. that, like we say, serves Rotherham so well in League One, but that making that step up to the Championship, I just think sometimes it's maybe something a little bit more psychological, and bottom line comes down to belief.
We've spent a lot of time contrasting him to Gareth Ainsworth, Mike, so far. In terms of managers that he is similar to, is there anybody? I must admit, I'm going to think about managers past and present in the Football League, and to me, when I hear Warne speak, when he first came out as well, and we first saw him as Rotherham manager, he just felt very different to anyone we've seen before. But is there any one personality type that is similar?
I also can make comparisons with Carl Robinson. Carl Robinson, a manager that has had one promotion from League One into the Championship. Yet you listen to Carl Robinson speak, and he's a lot more sure of himself in the way he presents himself, the way that he comes across in his post-match interviews, can be very much wears his heart on his sleeve. And I think, the pair of them are both very original thinkers. Warne is a very original thinker in what he does. And, you hear some of his motivational techniques down the years that he has used in certain matches have been absolutely inspired. I think back to one in particular, away at Ipswich last season in League One. And they went away to Ipswich. Ipswich, top of the table at the time, really going well. And Warne basically turned around to his dressing room. Whiteboard was out in the dressing room just before kickoff. And he handed the players one by one the pen and said, I want to write on the board somebody who you want to win this game for. And, the players took turns, and they all sort of got into the role, and they thought of someone they loved, or someone dear to them, or a reason why this game meant so much to them. Then Warne went last. He picked up the pen, he went to the whiteboard, and he wrote his dad's name, and then explained to the dressing room how his dad was a Norwich fan and what it would have mean to his dad. And his dad had just passed away that year. I mean, you talk about authenticity and vulnerability and all of those kinds of things. I mean, how can you not go out after that team talk and not then go and win it? And it's not like Paul Warne's a manager that asks it's about him or asks anything to go and do it for me. But that was just one occasion where he kind of made the point, a brilliant way to make the point of saying, my dad's a Norwich fan. He really would have loved for me to win this game. Can you go out and win it? The way he built the team talk up for that moment just before they left the dressing room, incredible, really brilliant piece of motivation.
Yeah, fantastic. And really connecting with his players on a human level as well. Before we move on to Aitor Karanka, Mike, is there anything else you'd like to add about Paul Warne? Anything else that we know from his personality? And also, I think we should ask as well, the victory against Derby, a turning point. You're seeing a change in certainly his attitude post-match and maybe even his body language. Are Rotherham going to kick on from here?
I hope so. I think the main point I want to make is that, this season is not 2 seasons ago. And I think Warne, a lot of what I've said in this section is related to what happened 2 seasons ago. There's been threads of it still this season, but there is a quiet shift taking place, but I don't feel like it's a big enough shift yet. I'd love this to be the catalyst for something for Rotherham, and that Rotherham, because you look at Rotherham in League One and they routinely go away from home and win games 2-1, 3-1 in a kind of really bullish nature. And there's just too many 1-0, 2-0 defeats and things where they only get going after they've gone behind at this level. And, I'd love it to be a turn. I'd just love to see the full shift of what they could be, if and if you go down all guns blazing, telling everyone you're going to stay up and then you don't, and so what? But, you've kind of really, you've really nailed your colours to the mast of what you're all about. And, you're not doing things in half measure psychologically and trying to play down your chances, play them up a bit like Gareth Ainsworth does. That's what I'd love to see in the second half of the season.